The morning fog rolled across the Coronado beach like a thick gray blanket, hiding the waves that crashed endlessly against the shore. Maya Rodriguez stood at the gates of the Naval Special Warfare Center for the fourth time in 6 years. Her hands gripped the chain-link fence as she watched another group of hopeful candidates march through those gates, all men, again. The security guard at the checkpoint didn't even look up from his clipboard when she approached. He'd seen her before. They all had. "Ma'am, I already told you 3 times before. Women aren't allowed in SEAL training. It's policy." His voice carried the tired patience of someone who'd had this conversation too many times. Maya pulled out her military identification card and placed it on the small counter. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps. 3 tours in Afghanistan, expert marksman, combat veteran. None of it seemed to matter here. "Sir, I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the same opportunity to fail that you give every man who walks through those gates." The guard finally looked up, his weathered face showing a mix of annoyance and something that might have been respect. "Look, lady, I don't make the rules. Take it up with someone who does." Maya had been taking it up with someone who did for 6 long years. She'd written letters to congressmen, filed formal requests through military channels, and even tried to get media attention. Nothing worked. The answer was always the same. No women in SEAL training, period. But Maya Rodriguez had never been good at taking no for an answer. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she'd learned that sometimes you had to fight for everything you wanted. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who never talked about his service, had taught her to shoot when she was 12 years old. Her mother, who worked 3 jobs to keep their family fed, had taught her that hard work always pays off, even when it doesn't seem like it will. When Maya joined the Marines at 18, she wasn't looking to make history. She just wanted to serve her country and maybe get some college money along the way. But something happened during her first tour in Afghanistan that changed everything. It was a hot Tuesday morning in Helmand Province. Maya's unit was providing security for a convoy when insurgents attacked from the hills surrounding the road. The enemy fighters had chosen their position well. They held the high ground and had clear lines of fire on the trapped convoy below. Maya's team leader, Sergeant Johnson, was hit in the first minutes of the firefight. Then Corporal Williams went down. The convoy was pinned down, and the enemy sniper in the hills was picking off Marines one by one. Someone needed to take out that sniper, and they needed to do it fast. Maya had always been good with a rifle. Better than good, actually. On the range back at Camp Pendleton, she consistently outshot men who had been training twice as long as she had. But this wasn't the range. This was combat, and people were dying. She grabbed Johnson's rifle and crawled to a position where she could see the muzzle flashes from the enemy sniper's position. The distance was over 800 meters. The wind was gusting. The target was partially concealed behind rocks. It was not an easy shot by any standard. Maya steadied herself, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The enemy fire stopped immediately. 1 shot, 1 kill. The convoy was able to move, and no more Marines died that day. Word of Maya's shot spread quickly through the Marine Corps. A female Marine had made a kill shot at 800 meters under combat conditions. It was the kind of shooting that Special Operations snipers were known for, the kind of shooting that SEAL snipers were famous for. That's when Maya first started thinking about SEAL training. If she could make shots like that under pressure, why shouldn't she be allowed to try for the most elite military unit in the world? The SEALs were supposed to be about finding the best warriors, regardless of anything else. At least that's what their recruiting materials said. Her first rejection came 6 months after she returned from Afghanistan. The letter was polite but firm. Women were not eligible for SEAL training due to the physical demands and combat nature of the program. Thank you for your interest in naval special warfare. Maya appealed the decision. She submitted her combat record, her fitness scores, and letters of recommendation from her commanding officers. The second rejection came 4 months later. Same reason. Same polite language, same closed door. The third rejection didn't even include an explanation, just a form letter stating that her application had been reviewed and denied. By that point, Maya had been promoted to staff sergeant and had completed 2 more combat tours. She'd made 17 confirmed kills as a designated marksman, including several at distances that impressed even veteran snipers. None of it mattered. The fourth rejection was different. It came with a phone call from a Colonel Peterson at Naval Special Warfare Command. He was direct in a way that Maya appreciated. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, I've reviewed your file. Your shooting scores are exceptional. Your combat record is impressive, but policy is policy. We don't train women for SEAL teams. Sir, with respect, policy changes. The military has changed before. Not this policy. Not in my lifetime. Find another career path, Staff Sergeant. You're wasting your time and mine." Maya hung up the phone and stared at the recruitment poster on her wall. Navy SEALs in full combat gear, emerging from dark water like something out of a movie. The caption read, "The only easy day was yesterday." She was 28 years old. She'd spent 10 years in the Marines, earned multiple decorations for valor, and proven herself in combat more times than she could count. But apparently, none of that was enough to earn her a chance to even try SEAL training. Most people would have given up. Most people would have found something else to do with their military career. Maya Rodriguez wasn't most people. Instead of accepting defeat, she decided to change her approach. If the Navy wouldn't let her train as a SEAL, she would train herself to SEAL standards. If they wouldn't give her access to their shooting ranges, she would find better ones. If they wouldn't let her prove herself in their tests, she would prove herself somewhere else. Maya used her military leave time to attend advanced sniper schools. She spent her own money on specialized training courses. She networked with former SEALs who had become private instructors. Slowly, quietly, she began building a reputation in the small world of elite military marksmen. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Master Chief Tom Bradley had been a SEAL sniper for 22 years before retiring to run a private training company. He'd heard stories about a Marine female sniper who was outperforming his male students in advanced courses. He was skeptical until he saw Maya shoot. "I've trained hundreds of snipers," he told her after watching her put 5 rounds through the same hole at 600 meters. "Military, law enforcement, private contractors. You're in the top 5 I've ever seen. Maybe top 3. "But I'm not a SEAL," Maya replied, lowering her rifle. "Neither were most SEALs when they started training. They became SEALs because someone gave them a chance to prove themselves." Master Chief Bradley made a phone call that night to someone he'd served with for 15 years. Captain James Mitchell had been Bradley's platoon leader in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now he was a senior officer at Naval Special Warfare Command. The conversation was brief. "Jim, I've got someone you need to see. I know what you're going to say, but hear me out. This Marine can shoot better than anyone I've trained in the last 10 years, including your guys." "Tom, you know I can't—" "I'm not asking you to change policy. I'm asking you to witness something. Give me 2 hours of your time. If I'm wrong, I'll never bring it up again." Captain Mitchell had known Bradley long enough to trust his judgment. More importantly, he'd served with him in enough dangerous situations to know that Bradley never exaggerated about things that mattered. If he said someone could shoot, they could shoot. 2 hours, Tom. That's all. 3 weeks later, Maya found herself at a private shooting range in the mountains east of San Diego. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She wasn't representing the Marines. She was just a woman with a rifle, trying to prove something that everyone said was impossible to prove. Captain Mitchell arrived with 2 other SEAL officers. They didn't introduce themselves beyond their first names. They didn't shake hands. They just watched as Master Chief Bradley set up a series of targets at different distances and angles. "The test is simple," Bradley explained. 12 targets, distances from 400 to 1,200 meters, various environmental conditions. Miss more than 2 and we all go home. Hit 10 or more, and maybe we have something to talk about." Maya nodded and took her position. She'd been preparing for this moment for 6 years. Not just the shooting, but everything that led up to it. The rejections, the closed doors, the people who told her she wasn't good enough or strong enough or right enough for what she wanted to do. She thought about her father, who died the year before without ever seeing her get the chance she'd been fighting for. She thought about the Marines who'd served under her leadership and trusted her to make the shots that would bring them home safely. She thought about every woman who might come after her, looking for a door that had always been closed. Maya Rodriguez chambered her first round and settled into her shooting position. Through her scope, she could see Captain Mitchell and the other SEAL officers watching her with expressions that mixed curiosity with skepticism. They'd probably agreed to this just to humor Master Chief Bradley. They expected her to fail. She took a deep breath, let half of it out, and placed her crosshairs on the first target. 400 meters. Easy shot. But nothing about this was really easy. This wasn't just about hitting targets. This was about proving that 6 years of rejection and closed doors and form letters hadn't broken something essential inside her. The first shot rang out across the desert, echoing off the hills like thunder. Through her scope, Maya could see the small hole that appeared in the center of the target. 1 down, 11 to go. She worked methodically through the course, adjusting for wind and elevation with each shot. The SEAL officers stopped talking after her 3rd consecutive bullseye. By her 6th hit, they had moved closer to get a better view of her targets. When she put her 8th round through a target at 900 meters in a crosswind, one of them actually whistled quietly. Target 12 was the hardest shot Bradley could design. 1,200 meters uphill, with shifting wind conditions and a target that was partially obscured by vegetation. It was the kind of shot that even experienced SEAL snipers might miss on a good day. Maya took her time with the final shot. She studied the target, read the wind, checked her calculations twice. Everything she'd worked for came down to this moment. 6 years of fighting for a chance, hundreds of hours of training, thousands of rounds fired in practice. She squeezed the trigger gently, following through on the shot exactly as her father had taught her 16 years earlier. The bullet took nearly 2 seconds to travel the distance to the target. In that time, Maya held her breath and watched through her scope as the round tracked true. 12 for 12. When Maya lowered her rifle, the desert was completely silent, except for the wind. Captain Mitchell was staring downrange at the targets with an expression she couldn't read. The other SEAL officers were exchanging glances that seemed to communicate something without words. Master Chief Bradley was grinning like someone who'd just won a very large bet. "Gentlemen," he said, breaking the silence, "I believe we have something to discuss." Captain Mitchell walked over to where Maya was standing. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she'd expected, probably in his early 40s, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of outdoor operations. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, that was exceptional shooting. Master Chief Bradley wasn't exaggerating." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "But I'm sure you understand that marksmanship is only one aspect of what we do. SEAL training tests much more than shooting ability." "Yes, sir. I understand that. The physical requirements alone eliminate most candidates. The mental pressure breaks others. Even if someone could change the policy that prevents women from training with us, there's no guarantee you could complete the program." Maya had heard variations of this speech before. The warnings about how difficult SEAL training was, how few people could handle it, how she should probably find something else to do with her military career. But this time was different. This time, the person giving the speech had just watched her shoot better than most of his trained snipers. "Sir, I'm not asking for a guarantee. I'm asking for a chance to fail." Captain Mitchell nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. "If such an opportunity were to become available, hypothetically speaking, would you be prepared to commit to the full program?" Bud S is 6 months. SEAL qualification training is another 6 months after that. It would mean leaving the Marines. Yes, sir. I've been prepared for that possibility for 6 years. And if you failed? If you washed out like 70% of the men who attempt it? Then I'd fail knowing I tried, sir. That's better than spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if someone had given me the chance. Captain Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, looking out across the desert toward the distant targets that Maya had just destroyed with 12 perfect shots. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Changes in military policy don't happen quickly, Staff Sergeant. They require approval from people much higher up the chain of command than me. But sometimes, exceptional circumstances create opportunities for exceptional individuals. He handed her a business card with nothing on it but a phone number. If you're serious about this, call that number in exactly 30 days. Not 29 days, not 31 days, exactly 30. If someone answers, listen to what they tell you. If no one answers, forget we had this conversation. Maya took the card and put it in her pocket. What happens in 30 days, sir? I honestly don't know, Staff Sergeant, but I think we're all going to find out. 3 hours later, Maya was driving back toward Camp Pendleton, with Master Chief Bradley's words echoing in her head. You just did something that might change everything, he'd said as they packed up the shooting equipment. Or it might change nothing. Either way, you proved something important today. Maya wasn't sure what she'd proved exactly. She knew she could shoot. She'd known that for years. What she'd really done was put herself in a position where the right people had witnessed her abilities. Whether that would lead to anything remained to be seen. The business card in her pocket felt heavier than it should have. 30 days. 1 month to wait and wonder if 6 years of fighting for a chance had finally paid off. 1 month to imagine what might happen if that phone number actually connected her to someone who could open doors that had been closed for her entire military career. Maya Rodriguez had been told no 4 times. She'd been rejected, dismissed, and told to find something else to do with her life. But she'd also just shot 12 for 12 in front of 3 SEAL officers who'd never seen anything quite like it. 30 days. She could wait 30 days. She'd already waited 6 years. As Maya drove through the gathering darkness toward the base, she allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it would feel like to finally get the chance she'd been fighting for. The chance to prove that determination mattered more than policy. That skill mattered more than tradition. That being the best at something should be enough, regardless of everything else. In 30 days, she would find out if the world was ready for that kind of change. In 30 days, Maya Rodriguez would discover whether 6 years of refusing to accept no for an answer had finally led to yes. Maya counted every single one of those 30 days. She marked them off on her calendar like a prisoner counting down a sentence. Each morning brought her closer to the phone call that might change everything or confirm that nothing had changed at all. During those 30 days, she maintained her usual training routine, but something was different. Other Marines in her unit noticed it. Her shooting instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Williams, pulled her aside after a particularly impressive range session. Rodriguez, I don't know what you're planning, but you're shooting like someone getting ready for war. Your groups are tighter than I've seen in 20 years of training Marines. Maya just smiled and cleaned her rifle. She couldn't explain that she was preparing for something that might not even exist, that she was training for an opportunity that had never been given to any woman in American military history. On day 29, Maya barely slept. She lay in her barracks bunk, staring at the ceiling, playing out different scenarios in her mind. What if no one answered the phone? What if the whole thing had been some kind of test that she'd already failed? What if Captain Mitchell had been transferred or had changed his mind? At exactly 1400 hours on the 30th day, Maya dialed the number from the card. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She was beginning to think no one would answer when a voice came on the line. "This is Thompson. You're right on time. Sir, this is Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps. Captain Mitchell told me to call this number. I know who you are, Staff Sergeant. Captain Mitchell briefed me on your demonstration. Impressive shooting. We need to meet. Yes, sir. When and where? Tonight, 2200 hours. There's a diner called Murphy's on Highway 76, about 20 miles east of Camp Pendleton. Come alone. Civilian clothes. Tell no one where you're going. The line went dead. Murphy's diner looked like something from a 1950s movie. Neon signs flickered in the windows, and the parking lot was mostly empty except for a few long-haul trucks and an older sedan with government plates. Maya arrived 15 minutes early and took a corner booth where she could watch the door. At exactly 2200 hours, a man in his 50s walked in wearing jeans and a plain black t-shirt. He looked like he could be anyone. A construction worker, a truck driver, a retired cop. But Maya noticed the way he moved, the way his eyes automatically scanned the room before settling on her. This was Thompson. He sat down across from her without introducing himself and ordered coffee from the waitress, like they did this kind of thing every night. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this diner. If you repeat any of this to anyone, it will be denied, and your military career will be over. Do you understand? Yes, sir. There are people in Washington who believe that military policy should evolve with military capability. These people have been watching your situation with interest. Your shooting demonstration 3 weeks ago confirmed what they suspected, that we may be excluding qualified personnel based on outdated assumptions. Thompson paused while the waitress refilled his coffee cup. When she was gone, he continued. However, changing official policy requires time, political will, and bureaucratic momentum. All of those things are in short supply. What we have instead is an opportunity to conduct an unofficial evaluation. What kind of evaluation? Sir, the kind that doesn't officially exist. The kind where success might open doors, but failure disappears without a trace. Maya felt her heart rate increase. This was what she'd been waiting for, but it wasn't coming in the way she'd expected. There's a situation developing overseas. We have intelligence assets in a hostile area who need extraction. The normal channels aren't available due to political sensitivities. We need someone who can operate independently, make difficult shots under pressure, and do it without any official backup or recognition. You're talking about a real mission, sir. I'm talking about something that might happen to someone who isn't officially involved in it. Someone whose success or failure wouldn't reflect on any particular military unit or training program. Thompson slid a manila envelope across the table. If you're interested in this hypothetical situation, those materials will help you prepare. If you're not interested, leave that envelope on the table and walk away. Either choice is acceptable. Maya looked at the envelope. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of, was probably inside that folder. But this wasn't the path she'd imagined. She'd wanted to prove herself in SEAL training, surrounded by other candidates, measured against established standards. This was something entirely different. This was jumping into the deep end without knowing how deep the water was. Sir, if I succeed in this hypothetical situation, what happens then? Then we have a data point suggesting that our current policies might need review. If you fail, well, some things are better left unrecorded. Maya picked up the envelope. How long do I have to decide? You just decided, Staff Sergeant. The materials in that envelope are time-sensitive. You have 72 hours to prepare. Thompson stood up and dropped a $10 bill on the table for the coffee. One more thing. If this goes well, you'll probably never get credit for it. If it goes badly, you'll definitely get blamed for it. Those are the terms. Understood, sir. After Thompson left, Maya sat in the diner for another 30 minutes before opening the envelope. Inside were satellite photographs, personnel files, and a mission brief that made her hands shake as she read it. 3 American intelligence officers were trapped in a compound in a hostile foreign country. Official rescue was impossible due to diplomatic complications. The compound was heavily guarded, surrounded by desert, and located in an area where American military presence would create an international incident. The mission required someone who could infiltrate the area, provide overwatch for an extraction team, and neutralize multiple targets at long range without being detected. Success meant 3 Americans came home alive. Failure meant they didn't, and whoever tried to save them might not come home either. Maya studied the satellite photos under the diner's fluorescent lights. The compound was surrounded by hills that offered excellent sniper positions, but the distances involved were extreme. The longest shot on her required list was over 1,400 meters, in desert conditions, at night, with moving targets. It was exactly the kind of mission that SEAL snipers trained for their entire careers. Maya drove back to base and spent the next 3 days in intensive preparation. She couldn't tell anyone what she was preparing for, so she had to be creative. She told her commanding officer she was taking leave to visit family. She told her squad she was attending a civilian shooting competition. She told the base armorer she was conducting equipment testing. All of it was true in a way. She requisitioned specialized ammunition and high-end optics through official channels, claiming they were for training exercises. She spent hours studying the satellite imagery and memorizing every detail of the target area. She practiced extreme distance shooting at a remote range, pushing herself to make shots she'd never attempted before. On the 3rd night, Thompson called with final instructions. "There's a private airfield outside Yuma. Be there at 300 hours. Bring only what you can carry. Everything else will be provided." "Sir, am I going alone?" "You'll have support, but you're the primary. The success or failure of this operation depends entirely on your ability to do what you convinced Captain Mitchell you could do." Maya packed her gear in a single duffel bag. Her personal rifle, which she'd modified over several years to meet her exact specifications. Night vision equipment she'd purchased with her own money. Ghillie suit components she'd crafted during off-duty hours. Everything she might need to become invisible in hostile territory and make shots that could save lives or start wars. The flight to the operational area took 18 hours, with 2 refueling stops. Maya traveled with 4 men who introduced themselves only by first names. Jack seemed to be in charge, a former SEAL with 15 years of experience. Mike and Tony were described as extraction specialists. Carlos was communications. They briefed her during the flight, going over every detail of the mission timeline. The intelligence officers were being held in a compound that had been under surveillance for 6 weeks. Guards followed predictable patterns. The extraction team would move in at 200 hours local time, when security was lightest. Maya's job was to position herself on a ridge 1,200 meters from the compound and provide overwatch. If everything went according to plan, she wouldn't fire a single shot. If things went wrong, she might need to engage multiple targets at distances that would challenge the best snipers in the world. "Remember," Jack told her as they approached the drop zone, "this mission doesn't exist. If we get compromised, there's no backup coming, no air support, no cavalry over the hill. We succeed with what we brought, or we don't succeed at all." Maya nodded. She'd understood those terms from the beginning. They inserted at night in hostile territory, using techniques Maya had never experienced but adapted to quickly. The team moved through rough terrain for 4 hours, reaching their positions just as the sun was beginning to rise behind them. Maya's hide site was a natural depression in the rocky ridge that overlooked the target compound. She'd studied this position in satellite photos for 3 days, but being there in person revealed details no photograph could capture: wind patterns, ambient light conditions, the exact angles required for each potential shot. She settled into position and began the patient work of long-range surveillance. Through her scope, she could see guards moving around the compound in patterns that matched their intelligence reports. 2 men at the main gate, one roving patrol that circled the building every 30 minutes, 3 static positions on elevated platforms. At 1400 hours, Maya observed something that wasn't in their intelligence reports. A convoy of 3 vehicles approached the compound from the south. 12 additional fighters took positions around the perimeter. Whatever was about to happen, it was bigger than anyone had anticipated. Maya keyed her radio. "Overwatch to base. We have company. Count 12 additional hostiles, armed and establishing defensive positions." Jack's voice crackled back through her earpiece. "Copy that, Overwatch. Mission continues as planned. Be prepared for multiple targets." For the next 8 hours, Maya watched and waited. She tracked the movement patterns of the new guards. She calculated distances and angles for each position she might need to engage. She made mental notes of wind conditions as the sun set and temperature dropped. At 01:45 hours, the extraction team moved into position. Maya could see Jack and Mike approaching the compound from the north, while Tony circled around to the south. Carlos remained at the base position, coordinating communications. Everything was going according to plan until it wasn't. At 02:03 hours, one of the roving patrols deviated from its usual route. Instead of following the perimeter, the guard walked directly toward the position where Jack and Mike were concealed. Maya watched through her scope as the guard stopped, raised his weapon, and began shouting in a language she didn't understand. Lights began coming on throughout the compound. More guards emerged from buildings. Within seconds, what had been a quiet extraction had become a full-scale firefight. "Overwatch, we are compromised!" Jack's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Multiple hostiles. Need immediate fire support." Maya had been waiting for this moment her entire military career. Not the mission itself, but the moment when everything depended on her ability to do exactly what she'd trained for under conditions that would break lesser shooters. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flashes erupting from multiple positions around the compound. The extraction team was pinned down behind inadequate cover, taking fire from at least 8 different directions. The intelligence officers they'd come to rescue were still trapped somewhere inside the main building. Maya's first shot was at a guard on an elevated platform 1183 meters away. The man was firing down at Jack's position with an automatic weapon. Maya adjusted for wind and elevation, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The guard dropped immediately, his weapon clattering to the ground below. Her second shot took out a sniper who had positioned himself on the compound's roof, 1247 meters. The bullet arrived before the sound of the gunshot, and the enemy sniper never knew what hit him. Maya worked systematically through the targets, engaging guards who posed the greatest threat to the extraction team. Each shot required different calculations, different holds for wind and distance, different leads for moving targets. Shot 3, guard at the main gate, 1156 meters, clean hit. Shot 4, machine gunner in a defensive position, 1284 meters. The man had been raking Jack's position with suppressing fire. Now he was silent. Shot 5, roving patrol member who had flanked around to Tony's position, 1094 meters. Moving target. Maya led him perfectly, and he dropped mid-stride. The firefight continued for 23 minutes. Maya made 17 separate shots during that time, each one calculated to remove a specific threat to the extraction team. 17 shots, 17 hits, 17 enemy fighters who would never threaten American personnel again. When the shooting finally stopped, the compound was quiet, except for the crackling of small fires. Maya could see Jack and his team moving through the building where the intelligence officers had been held. 10 minutes later, her radio crackled to life. "Overwatch, this is base. Package secured. All 3 packages are healthy and mobile. Outstanding work." Maya remained in position for another 2 hours, providing security as the extraction team moved the rescued intelligence officers to the pickup point. Only when she received confirmation that everyone was safely away from the target area did she begin breaking down her equipment and preparing for extraction. During the flight back to the United States, Jack sat down beside Maya as she was cleaning her rifle. 17 shots, 17 hits, in combat conditions, at distances most snipers only dream about. He shook his head in amazement. I've worked with SEAL snipers, Army Special Forces snipers, Marine Scout snipers. I've never seen shooting like that. Thank you, sir. Maya, what you did tonight saved lives. 3 Americans are going home to their families because you made 17 impossible shots when it mattered most. That's not something that happens by accident. That's the result of skill, training, and the kind of mental toughness that can't be taught. Jack paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I'm going to write a report about this operation. Obviously, it won't include your name or any details that could compromise operational security. But certain people are going to read about what happened tonight, and they're going to understand that we might need to reconsider some of our policies. Maya looked out the aircraft window at the darkness below. Somewhere down there, 3 American intelligence officers were alive because she'd been given a chance to prove herself. It wasn't the kind of proof she'd imagined when she first applied for SEAL training, but it was proof nonetheless. Sir, what happens now? Now you go back to being Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps. You return to your regular duties, and you never talk about what happened tonight. But Maya, Jack looked at her seriously. Change is coming. What you did tonight is going to be part of that change. 3 days later, Maya was back at Camp Pendleton, conducting routine training exercises with her unit. Everything appeared exactly as it had been before she left. Same barracks, same responsibilities, same uniform, but something fundamental had shifted. She'd proven herself in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. She'd made shots under combat conditions that demonstrated capabilities beyond what most people thought possible. She'd saved lives and completed a mission that had required the absolute best of everything she'd learned in 10 years of military service. And officially, none of it had ever happened. Maya resumed her normal duties, but she noticed changes in how certain people treated her. Her commanding officer seemed to watch her differently during training exercises. The base commander made a point of speaking with her personally during routine inspections. Phone calls came from numbers she didn't recognize, from people who asked seemingly casual questions about her future plans and career goals. 2 months after the mission that didn't officially exist, Maya received an email that looked routine but wasn't. It was an invitation to attend a conference on advanced marksmanship techniques at a facility in Virginia. The conference was being hosted by an organization she'd never heard of, but the agenda included speakers from every elite military unit in the United States. Maya forwarded the invitation to her chain of command and was surprised when approval came back within hours. Usually, conference attendance required weeks of bureaucratic review. This time, her commanding officer simply signed the paperwork and told her to take as much time as she needed. The conference facility turned out to be a private training center that catered to military and law enforcement specialists. Maya arrived expecting to attend seminars and network with other shooting instructors. Instead, she was met at the registration desk by Captain Mitchell. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, good to see you again. I think it's time we had another conversation. They walked to a private office where 2 other men were waiting. One wore Navy dress uniform with insignia Maya didn't immediately recognize. The other was in civilian clothes but carried himself like senior military. Captain Mitchell made the introductions. Staff Sergeant, this is Admiral Harrison, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, and this is Mr. Wilson from the Department of Defense. Maya came to attention, but Admiral Harrison gestured for her to sit down. Staff Sergeant, we're here to discuss some recent developments in military policy. Specifically, changes that might affect opportunities for exceptional personnel who have previously been excluded from certain training programs. Maya kept her expression neutral, but her heart was racing. This was the conversation she'd been waiting for since she first applied for SEAL training 6 years earlier. Sir, I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to. Admiral Harrison smiled. Staff Sergeant, we're all professionals here. We're aware that exceptional circumstances sometimes require exceptional solutions. We're also aware that those solutions sometimes demonstrate capabilities that exceed our previous assumptions. Mr. Wilson opened a file folder and pulled out several documents. The Department of Defense has been reviewing exclusionary policies across all service branches. Recent operational experiences have suggested that our current criteria for certain programs may not accurately reflect the requirements for success. What Mr. Wilson is saying, Captain Mitchell interjected, is that policy is finally catching up with capability. The question is whether you're still interested in the opportunity that brought us together in the first place. Maya looked around the room at three men who represented the highest levels of military leadership. They were offering her something that had never been offered to any woman in American history. Sir, are you asking if I want to attempt SEAL training? I'm asking if you're prepared to make 17 impossible shots when everything depends on it, Admiral Harrison replied, because that's what being a SEAL really means, making the impossible shot, every time, under any conditions. Maya Rodriguez had spent 6 years fighting for this chance. She'd been rejected 4 times. She'd proven herself in combat conditions that tested every skill she possessed. She'd made shots that saved lives and changed policies. Now, finally, someone was ready to give her the opportunity to find out just how far her refusal to accept no for an answer could take her. Yes, sir, Maya said. I'm ready. The first day of basic underwater demolition SEAL training dawned gray and cold over Coronado Beach. Maya Rodriguez stood in formation with 43 other candidates, all men, all younger than her, all wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. She'd walked through these same gates 6 years earlier as someone begging for a chance. Now she was here as someone who'd already proven she belonged, even if most of the people around her didn't know it yet. The instructors didn't make any special announcements about having a woman in the class. They didn't explain the policy changes that had made this moment possible. They simply treated Maya like every other candidate, which meant they treated her like someone they were going to try their best to break. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was the lead instructor, a compact man with 20 years of SEAL experience and a reputation for washing out candidates who thought they were tougher than they actually were. He walked down the line of candidates, stopping in front of each one to deliver a personal assessment that usually involved pointing out their most obvious weaknesses. When he reached Maya, he paused longer than he had with anyone else. Rodriguez, you're older than most of these guys. You've been in the Marines longer than some of them have been adults. You think that experience gives you an advantage? No, Chief. I think it gives me perspective. Perspective. Martinez repeated the word like it tasted bad. What kind of perspective is that? The perspective that comes from understanding the difference between being tough and being smart, Chief. Martinez almost smiled. Almost. We'll see about that, Rodriguez. We'll definitely see about that. The first week of Bud S was designed to weed out candidates who weren't physically or mentally prepared for what came next. The training was brutal, but not impossible. Long runs on the beach, endless calisthenics, swimming in cold ocean water. Maya had been preparing for this for years, and her performance matched or exceeded that of most candidates. But she could feel the attention. Instructors watched her more closely than the others. Her fellow candidates studied her during breaks, trying to figure out how she'd gotten there and whether she belonged. The media had somehow learned about the first woman in SEAL training, and photographers with long lenses lurked outside the base perimeter. Maya ignored all of it and focused on the only thing that mattered, proving she could do everything that was required of her. The real test came during week 3, when the class began what SEAL candidates knew simply as Hell Week. 5.5 days of continuous training with almost no sleep, designed to push human endurance beyond normal limits. It was where most candidates either proved themselves or quit. Hell Week started on a Sunday night with what instructors called breakout. Candidates were roused from their bunks by instructors firing blanks and shouting orders through bullhorns. Within minutes, they were on the beach in full gear, beginning a week that would test everything they thought they knew about their own limitations. Maya had studied Hell Week extensively. She'd read every memoir, watched every documentary, and interviewed former SEALs about their experiences. But no amount of preparation could replicate the actual experience of functioning on 2 hours of sleep while carrying a 200-pound log over your head for miles at a time. By Tuesday morning, 12 candidates had quit. The class that had started with 44 was down to 32, and everyone was showing signs of extreme fatigue. Maya's hands were raw from rope climbing, her legs cramped constantly from the endless running and swimming. Her uniform was permanently soaked with a mixture of salt water, sweat, and sand. But she was still there. Wednesday brought the night navigation exercise, where candidates had to find their way through a complex course in complete darkness while carrying heavy equipment. Maya's Marine Corps experience with land navigation served her well here. While other candidates struggled to read their compasses and pace count accurately, she moved through the course methodically, reaching each checkpoint ahead of schedule. Thursday was when things got personal. The instructors had clearly decided that having a woman complete Hell Week would send the wrong message about SEAL standards. They began targeting Maya specifically, assigning her extra tasks and scrutinizing her performance more closely than anyone else's. During a boat crew exercise, Chief Martinez stopped the entire evolution to point out a minor discrepancy in how Maya had secured her equipment. "Rodriguez, what is this?" He held up a piece of gear that was tied with a slightly different knot than the others. "It's a bowline, Chief. Same function as the others, different technique." "I didn't ask for innovation, Rodriguez. I asked for compliance. Push-ups. Now." Maya dropped and began doing push-ups in the sand while the rest of her boat crew stood at attention, watching. After 50 repetitions, Martinez told her to recover. "Just because you did something different in the Marines doesn't mean it's right here. In the teams, we do things one way, the right way. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Chief." But Maya could see what was happening. The instructors were looking for any excuse to eliminate her. Not because she couldn't perform, but because her presence challenged assumptions that some people weren't ready to abandon. Thursday night brought the log PT evolution, where boat crews had to carry 200-pound telephone poles through a series of increasingly difficult exercises. Maya's boat crew started strong, but by the third hour, fatigue was setting in. The logs got heavier, the exercises got harder. One by one, candidates began to break. Maya's boat crew was down to 5 members when disaster struck. Candidate Johnson, who'd been struggling all week, simply couldn't hold up his section of the log anymore. He stumbled, lost his grip, and the entire log came crashing down. "Johnson, on your feet! What happened?" Martinez appeared instantly, as instructors always seemed to do when someone was failing. "I can't feel my hands anymore, Chief. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't carry the log, Johnson. Rodriguez, you're boat crew leader now. Get this log moving." Maya looked around at her remaining crew members. They were all exhausted, all operating on pure determination. Johnson was clearly done, unable to continue safely. That left 4 people to carry a log designed for 6. "Chief, request permission to redistribute the load among available crew members." "Negative. 6-person log, Rodriguez. Find a way to make it work or find the bell." Maya knew exactly what Martinez was doing. The bell was a brass ship's bell mounted on a post near the training area. Any candidate could ring it 3 times to quit the program immediately. Martinez was giving her a choice. Attempt something that was probably impossible, or quit like a rational person would. Maya looked at the log, then at her crew. All Marines knew that you never leave someone behind. All warriors knew that sometimes you had to attempt the impossible simply because it was the right thing to do. All right, listen up, she told her crew. Johnson, you take rear security. Watch for hazards and call out obstacles. The rest of us are going to carry this log, and we're going to do it right. For the next 2 hours, 4 SEAL candidates carried a 200-pound log through exercises that had been designed for 6 people. They modified their grip techniques to distribute the weight more evenly. They communicated constantly to coordinate their movements. They took turns bearing extra load when someone needed a brief rest. Maya carried more than her share of the weight, using techniques she'd learned during Marine Corps combat training. When someone's grip was failing, she shifted position to compensate. When the pace slowed, she called cadence to keep everyone moving together. They completed every exercise. They never dropped the log. They never asked for help. When it was over, Chief Martinez stared at them for a long moment before speaking. That was either the stupidest thing I've ever seen or the most impressive. I haven't decided which. Friday brought the final evolution of Hell Week, a long ocean swim followed by a beach run that would determine who had earned the right to continue SEAL training. Of the original 44 candidates, only 19 remained. Maya entered the Pacific Ocean at 0400 hours for a 2-mile swim in conditions that were challenging even by SEAL standards. The water temperature was 58 degrees. Swells were running 6 to 8 feet. Visibility was limited by fog and darkness. She'd swum in these waters dozens of times during her preparation, but never under these conditions of extreme fatigue. Her body was operating on pure muscle memory and stubborn determination. Every stroke required conscious effort. Every breath was a small victory. Halfway through the swim, Maya realized she was no longer swimming with the main group. Somewhere in the darkness and confusion, she'd become separated from the other candidates. She could hear voices in the distance, but she couldn't determine which direction they were coming from. This was exactly the kind of situation that ended Hell Week for many candidates. Easy to get disoriented, easy to panic, easy to call for help and accept elimination from the program. Maya stopped swimming and floated for a moment, getting her bearings. She could see lights on shore, but they didn't match the pattern she'd memorized during briefings. The current had pushed her further south than expected. She was alone in the Pacific Ocean, in the dark, with no clear way to rejoin the group. She could continue south toward the visible lights and hope they led back to the beach where instructors would be waiting. Or she could trust her navigation training and swim north toward where the finish point should be, even though she couldn't see it. Maya chose north. She began swimming toward a destination she couldn't see, trusting her compass and pace count to guide her through conditions that challenged every skill she possessed. 43 minutes later, she touched sand at the exact beach where instructors were waiting with stopwatches. She was the 7th candidate to complete the swim, ahead of 12 men who had started the evolution in better positions. Chief Martinez was waiting as she ran up the beach toward the final checkpoint. Outstanding navigation, Rodriguez. How'd you find us in the dark? Same way I've been finding my way for 10 years, Chief. One stroke at a time. One stroke at a time. Martinez wrote something on his clipboard. I like that answer. The final beach run was 5 miles in soft sand while wearing wet uniforms and boots. Maya's legs felt like concrete pillars, but she maintained a steady pace, staying with the lead group as they moved along the shoreline in the early morning light. With 1 mile remaining, she could see the finish line ahead. She could also see photographers and television cameras that had been positioned to capture the first woman to complete Hell Week. Maya knew that her performance in these final minutes would be analyzed and debated by people who had never attempted anything remotely like what she'd just endured. She crossed the finish line in 8th place overall, ahead of 11 men who had started the week convinced that female Marines had no business in SEAL training. Chief Martinez gathered the surviving candidates around him as medical personnel checked them for injuries that required immediate attention. 19 of you started Hell Week. 19 of you finished it. That doesn't mean you're SEALs. It means you've earned the right to continue training. The next phase will test different skills, and some of you won't make it through. But today, you've proven something important about yourselves. He paused and looked directly at Maya. You've proven that when everything depends on your ability to keep going, you find a way to keep going. That's the foundation of everything we do in the teams. Rodriguez, outstanding work this week. The remaining months of Bud-S tested Maya in ways that were different but equally challenging. She learned underwater demolition techniques that required precise coordination with dive partners. She mastered small unit tactics that emphasized stealth and surprise over overwhelming firepower. She completed the sniper course that had been the original reason for her interest in SEAL training. Her shooting scores during sniper training were the highest recorded in the program's history. The 17 shots she'd made during the classified mission had been just the beginning. Under controlled conditions with unlimited time and ammunition, Maya consistently performed at levels that impressed instructors who had trained the military's best marksmen. But the most important lessons came during the teamwork exercises that taught candidates how to function as part of a SEAL platoon. Maya learned to trust teammates whose backgrounds were completely different from hers. She learned to lead when leadership was required and follow when someone else was better positioned to make decisions. Graduation day arrived 6 months after Hell Week. Of the original 44 candidates who had started Bud-S, only 14 completed the entire program. Maya Rodriguez was one of them, the first woman in American history to earn the right to wear the SEAL Trident. The graduation ceremony was held on Coronado Beach, where Maya had been rejected 4 times before finally getting the chance to prove herself. Her father's brother flew in from Los Angeles to represent the family. Master Chief Bradley, who had arranged her initial shooting demonstration, sat in the front row wearing his dress uniform and a proud smile. Admiral Harrison presented each graduate with their Trident insignia personally. When he reached Maya, he paused before pinning the symbol to her uniform. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, you've accomplished something that many people said was impossible. You've proven that determination and skill matter more than assumptions and traditions. Congratulations, and welcome to Naval Special Warfare. The Trident itself was small, just a golden eagle clutching an anchor, pistol, and Neptune's trident. But Maya knew it represented something much larger than the metal it was made from. It represented the end of a 6-year journey that had tested every aspect of her character and capability. It represented proof that refusing to accept limitations could sometimes change the world. After the ceremony, Chief Martinez approached Maya as she was packing her gear. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. When you first showed up here, I thought you were going to be a distraction that would make my job harder. I was wrong about that. You were just doing your job, Chief. No apology needed. Maybe. But I want you to know something. I've trained hundreds of candidates over the years. Most of them were good warriors who became good SEALs. A few were exceptional warriors who became exceptional SEALs. You're in the exceptional category, and it has nothing to do with you being the first woman to complete this training. Martinez paused, choosing his words carefully. What makes you exceptional is that you never used being different as an excuse for lower standards. You never asked for special treatment. You just showed up every day and did the work better than most people thought possible. That's what being a SEAL really means. 6 months later, Maya completed SEAL qualification training and was assigned to a West Coast SEAL team. Her platoon mates were initially skeptical about having a woman in their unit, but that skepticism disappeared during their first deployment when Maya's shooting skills proved themselves under combat conditions. During a nighttime raid in a hostile area, Maya made 3 shots at distances exceeding 800 meters that eliminated enemy fighters who had been threatening her teammates. The shots were made in darkness, in windy conditions, while under fire from multiple directions. They were the kind of impossible shots that had first brought her to the attention of people who could change policy. After that deployment, nobody questioned whether Maya Rodriguez belonged in naval special warfare. They only questioned how the military had been stupid enough to exclude people like her for so long. 5 years later, Maya had completed multiple deployments and earned decorations for valor that placed her among the most highly regarded snipers in the SEAL community. She'd made hundreds of shots under combat conditions, many of them at distances and in circumstances that challenged even veteran marksmen. But the shots she was most proud of weren't the ones that eliminated enemy threats or completed mission objectives. They were the shots that had opened doors for other women who wanted the chance to prove themselves in roles that had previously been closed to them. By 2030, 12 women had completed SEAL training. All of them could trace their opportunities back to the precedent that Maya had established by refusing to accept that some things were impossible simply because they'd never been done before. Maya Rodriguez had been rejected for SEAL training 4 times. She'd been told that women couldn't meet the physical standards, couldn't handle the mental pressure, and couldn't integrate into male-dominated units. She'd been advised to find other career paths and stop wasting her time on impossible dreams. Instead, she'd proven that impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been done yet. She'd shown that the most important qualification for doing extraordinary things wasn't being the right gender or the right age or the right anything else. It was being willing to work harder than everyone else thought was necessary to achieve something everyone else thought was impossible. The 17 shots that had saved 3 intelligence officers were now part of SEAL training lore, studied by new candidates as an example of what was possible when skill met opportunity under the most challenging circumstances. But Maya knew those shots were just the beginning of a larger story about what people could accomplish when someone finally gave them the chance to prove themselves. Standing on Coronado Beach 10 years after her first rejection, wearing the uniform of a naval special warfare operator, Maya Rodriguez understood that the most impossible shot she'd ever made wasn't taken through a rifle scope. It was the shot she'd taken at changing a system that had said she would never be good enough, regardless of how good she actually was. That shot had taken 6 years to set up, required perfect timing, and had demanded everything she had to give. But it had hit its target perfectly, opening a door that would never be closed again. Maya Rodriguez had refused to accept no for an answer. In the end, that refusal had changed everything, not just for her, but for every woman who came after her with the dream of proving that impossible was just another challenge waiting to be overcome. The only easy day had been yesterday, but today, and every day after, the definition of possible had been permanently expanded by 17 shots that proved determination could overcome any obstacle, including the ones that existed only in people's minds. Maya Rodriguez had made her point. Now others would have the chance to make theirs.